Welcome to Real Rover. I'm your roving host, John Craig. Real Rover へようこそ、クレイグ・ジョンでございます。Introducing you to people you would never have heard of if it wasn't for Real Rover. Here we go. Welcome to Real Rover, Dr. Laura Koniver. Laura Koniver received her medical doctorate degree from Jefferson Medical College in 2000 at the age of 26 and has been passionately supporting her patients' natural healing ever since. She is an artist, author, holistic physician, and internationally recognized grounding advocate. Koniver's healing artwork has been featured in many news and media outlets, and she's published her own children's book on grounding, From the Ground Up, which my grandchildren have read. She writes a regular health column in the national organic lifestyle magazine, Mary Jane's Farm, is featured as an expert protagonist in several motion pictures, including The Grounded, Heal for Free, The Earthing Movie, and Down to Earth, and runs the popular healthcare blog, intuitionphysician.com, where she reviews medical literature in a holistic and intuitive way. Welcome back, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is the third interview we've had with Dr. Koniver. And for those who haven't heard the previous ones, you might want to go back. There'll be a link here for you to go there. The first one was conducted about 2 years ago and covered the general idea and science behind earthing, at which point 2 years ago she had already a very vast experience, clinical data, double-blind studies, all of which we talked about during that first interview. The second interview was last year, and we focused on what's called electro-hypersensitivity, which I think in these days of 5G technology, a lot more people are thinking about. We may have some comments about that. But today, our main topic is going to be our new book, The Earth Prescription, subtitled Discover the Healing Power of Nature with Grounding Practices for Every Season. Why did you write a book, Laura?
I wrote a book because there are so many misconceptions in the grounding community, and I was constantly getting emails like, does it have to be through your bare feet? What do I do when it's cold outside? I live in a city, what should I do? And it just was, 90% of my day was helping people troubleshoot. And I just thought, I'm going to write a book about that. And I just happened to be contacted by the publisher, and they said, we were looking for someone to write a grounding book. And I said, I got you. So that's why I wrote the book, to help people have a tool in their hands to give them ideas and to answer their questions right then and there.
Yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions. You have to stand in your bare feet all year long, and this is not true. Why do you think people got the idea that it has to be only bare feet?
I'm not sure, except for that. That's just like basically the only advice you find on the internet is go get barefoot. And that's just all, be barefoot, be barefoot, be barefoot. So I guess people extrapolate from that it has to be, first of all, through their feet, which it doesn't. Your entire body is covered in electroconductive skin. And they feel that it has to be a certain amount of time, which I think was propagated by grounding companies selling products saying you have to do it for a long period of time to reap benefits because they want you to use products, which is not true. You can touch a leaf in an instant and be grounded like a light switch going on. And so I just think, and then, it might be a subtle pressure for people to do indoor grounding products. It might be a slight bit of that, like, what are you going to do when it's cold? You should buy something to, ground indoors with. What are you going to do if you live in a city? You got to buy a product to be grounded. And I guess this book is sort of a response to that. Grounding is the most natural thing. You can do it almost anywhere. You can do it through any body part, and you can do it for any length of time. So I just want it to be more accessible than, the propaganda out there, I guess.
I was grounding this morning, and I came upon a woman touching a tree and struck up a conversation about the fact that it's probably very good for preventing inflammation. The science suggests that. And she was a bit taken aback. And she said she'd had a hip replaced. And I ventured to suggest, if you had been earthing your body all the time, even touching a tree, you may not have developed to the stage where you would have to have a hip replaced. Now, was that completely off the wall from a medical perspective to say that?
It's definitely not off the wall, and there's plenty of evidence to show that it decreases the inflammation in the body, including in joints. So no, it's not off the wall. You have to be careful about promising anything, but I think it's very fair to say that grounding over time and the benefits are cumulative and can prevent a lot of wear and tear on the body, because really chronic disease is turning out to be, disease that we consider of old age, heart disease over time, brain atrophy over time, joint inflammation, wear and tear over time. Actually, it doesn't really matter about time. It matters about the inflammation accruing in the body. So we need longer term studies to be able to for me to go up to people in the park and say, you might not have had that hip replacement. I don't have a medical study that's quite that long term, because we're just rediscovering grounding right now. And we're just rediscovering how sick we are when we disconnect from the earth. But certainly you can say grounding decreases inflammation in your body. And certainly you can say there's imaging studies that show inflammation in a joint, including a hip joint, decreases when you're grounding. And so certainly it's reasonable to extrapolate that over time, this prevents a lot of wear and tear on the human body.
Oh, certainly. In my experience, we did earthing talks and seminars in Tokyo, and you were the featured guest via your videos. And one of the participants, when I asked at the end, did anybody feel any difference being grounded through a simple pad on the table on the 8th floor of a city block in Tokyo? At the end of this lecture, she yelled, and I thought she must be in pain, but it was joy, because she had spontaneously raised her left leg onto her right knee to tie her shoes. And she hadn't been able to do that for 8 years because of her inflamed hip. Now, wait a minute. In normal terms, this would be like, it's a miracle, but how could that possibly be, that an inflammation could possibly come down, or what's the medical story behind this? She really felt her hip was free of pain. How's that so quick?
Well, and I hope you told her that would, the benefits of that would increase over time. When you're talking about something within just a few minutes like that, it's absolutely 100% documented that your body is getting that biofeedback from and pain going down that quickly. But then over time, she might actually have improvement in her body sustained, so that when she's not grounding, she still feels better. But immediately, yes, it's absolutely that we have something called the vagus nerve. And it's actually appropriate to talk about right now with this pandemic going on, because when we're under stress, or when we have a disease, or when we have pain is a different type of stressor. So many changes happen to our body. We get inflammation, we get our hormone, cortisol raises, our heart rate goes up, we start fight or flight, sweating, our digestion goes wonky because we're really in this panic mode. And pain might have been having her live like that on a chronic level. Well, instantly when you ground, your vagal tone is supported, your parasympathetic nervous system shifts, your brainwave patterns even are reflected immediately on an EEG. And there is an instant biofeedback, basically, is what happened to her, where pain was decreased, her heart rate was able to come down, stressors came down, even muscle tension. So I don't know what with her physical illness was part muscle. I don't know what was part tendon. I don't know what was part pain, sensitive fibers being overridden, but absolutely within seconds, your central nervous system gets that biofeedback and your vagal nerve, the vagal tone improves enough so that you do have decreased pain, decreased muscle tension, and are starting to reduce inflammation even that quickly. So I have had many, many anecdotal stories like that as well. People who had surgery scheduled, like for carpal tunnel syndrome, who canceled surgeries once they started grounding. So I think that's a lovely story you shared.
Well, it's no wonder that you get pushback from the medical authorities when you mention anything like this, because it really does seem too good to be true unless you have been in that situation like I was. And we had many, many others, people with toothache, putting a patch on the afflicted area within 10 minutes, pain absolutely gone. And these are not people who are expecting to get better. They know nothing about earthing, they've grounding, they've just come to listen to the story, and well, maybe there's something to it. But then they see what's happening to each other, and every single one of them can notice something. Maybe their nose is less blocked. Some of them noted an increase in visual acuity, which amazed me. They said their eyes got better and they could read. I mean, how does that work?
Well, you can see that in the second movie, the Heal for Free movie, that there was a patient that was grounded for 2 hours in a retinal specialist's office. And a retinal specialist is a specialized ocular surgeon who deals with a really difficult part of the body, because usually your macula and your retina, when there's deterioration with age or with damage, it's a one-way street. You don't usually get your vision back. You don't usually have macular change. Once you start having macular degeneration, it's very hard to treat. That retinal specialist had never, ever, ever seen improvement in a retina the opposite way, but he was willing to have one of his patients grounded, and they grounded him for 2 hours. And you can see it in live footage in the film. The retinal specialist was in shock. He said, I've never seen the retina reperfuse like that. So even just quick vision changes like that can be explained with a dramatic change in your circulation. So things that haven't been perfused well, things that haven't been gotten oxygen and nutrients and healthy blood flow can be affected in minutes to hours, just by the fact that your blood flows more freely. That's not even talking about the fact that your central nervous system starts going in a healing phase. That's not talking about the response in your hormone cascade. I mean, that's literally just talking about that your blood flows better through your body. It's amazing. And that was shown in the movie. Literally, you can watch the retina, the blood flow go through the retina in the before grounding and after grounding.
You know, it occurs to me that it's probably a good idea that you aren't on Good Morning America, because talking about things like this, which have been documented, you've shown the science more than a decade. I mean, probably closer to 2 decades, you've been showing people this. And so for somebody who's looking at this now, who's never heard of earthing, there's got to be a massive pandemonium in the back of their head going on, wait a minute, are these two in cahoots or something? I mean, if this is true, what she just said, what this doctor just said, then wait a minute, this could take care of so many of my problems, like for free.
Yeah.
What? Surely everybody should know about this. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it should. Well, and it makes sense. Like, the Earth is literally a source of life. Obviously, no one can say that it isn't. I talked to multiple moonwalking astronauts who stood on the moon and saw, the Earth is it's a ball of life compared to the darkness of space. It obviously makes air and food and water and solid ground that supports vibrancy of life. So obviously, that life is supported by the Earth itself, and it's pulsating with its own electrical current, right? It's got its own Schumann resonance, its own frequency, its own heartbeat. So it's a docking station. It's this pulsating battery waiting to give life. It gives it to the plants and to the animals, and it creates an environment and an atmosphere that we can survive in. And yet to think that you aren't part of that equation, it's like waiting to dock you, but we're undocked. And it's just the final piece of the puzzle clicking when you're like, maybe my physiology was actually divinely or coincidentally, whatever you believe, meant to yin and yang dock with the earth. If the earth is providing something and I'm totally disconnected and I feel crappy over time, is it possible that, if you saw your cell phone charger just sitting on after a while, you see it and you see it and you see it, after a while, you're like, I wonder what this plug goes to. I wonder what this cord's supposed to go to, right? So, and you realize after time, if I keep using my cell phone and I don't charge it, it doesn't work. It doesn't function anymore. And instead of throwing it out, you just plug it to the little docking port and then you have a fresh, battery to go. And human beings are the exact same way. And I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think if divinely or not, the earth is designed to be a ball of provide life in every way, shape, and form, from the air we breathe to the water we drink to the nutrition we put in our body to the land that we build our home on. If it's sitting there waiting for me and I am completely disconnected from it, let me just experience what it feels like if I'm actually part of this environment too directly. And then you get it like that.
Yeah, I like the metaphor of being undocked. I think that's probably a metaphor that covers every aspect of modern life. The remaining people who are docked tend to be living in the middle of the Amazon, but even there, they're wearing Nikes a lot more, and without them even being aware of it, they've undocked themselves. So it's actually, grounding is actually something that covers just about everything. And in your book, what is interesting is that instead of pursuing the science, which I think you've done enough of through your videos and your articles on your blog, and in the previous movies, the science has been there to some extent. This is not about science, it's about discovering the healing power of nature. So you've started to tell us about how the earth is this vibrant port that we can dock into. But what about this idea that we're getting some kind of an electrical charge from the earth, that if we don't have it, we're going to get out of balance? Can you tell us where this energy comes from, or a little bit more about it that's coming through your body?
That's definitely the other half. So the first half, which we already talked about, is how beautiful and magnificent and the earth is, that it provides this heartbeat that's radiating out. But the other, just as beautiful, equally beautiful thing is the design of our human body. So it's not, to me, not a coincidence that every single cell in your body, every single cell in my body is conductive. And actually, even all the diseased parts are conductive. Anything that could go wrong with my body, from a blood clot to a sore muscle, to inflammation in my gut, to an abscess, completely conductive. There is no block to the energy from the earth moving through our entire body instantly. And that's the only modality that's like that. If I drink something, then it depends on my gut, or if I eat something, even if it's the most organic, raw, fresh pressed juice, it still depends on my gut to absorb it and then my circulatory system to distribute it. So usually the sicker I am, the worse those things are. If I have an infection that's not being healed by my innate immune system, then it's starting to build inflammation and scar tissue. And now my circulation for sure can't get there. And the Advil I took for sure isn't going to get there. And even the antibiotic might not be effective. But grounding's not like that, because in grounding, even the scar tissue, even the pus, even every single cell in your body is conductive. So there is zero barrier. The minute any part of your body touches the earth, your entire body immediately becomes grounded from head to toe. So to me, that's the beautiful part. It's not just beautiful that nature provides this. It's beautiful that our design is that one cell in your body, any cell in your body, is going to distribute whatever that is, whatever you want to call that grounding potential. It's going to immediately affect your entire body instantly and entirely with no barrier. So it's this really beautiful. In order for there to be benefit, the earth has to be providing something and we have to be able to receive it. And luckily, the earth is providing something and every cell in your body can receive it instantly. And so that's why it works. And so even if you're outside, but you're just wearing that Nike shoe that's cutting you off, you are not conducting anything until there's actual contact. So it's just this beautiful relationship that needs both sides equally. So it has to be your intention to go out and get grounded. It has to be that you physically do that.
Very important. So people will read the book, and of course, many will have this still ongoing pandemonium of, but wait, we have scientists all over the planet and doctors and specialists who would know or should know about this. Why haven't I heard about it? Why haven't I heard about it? This is going to go through their heads.
Just hasn't dawned on, okay, so we are, if you think about it, the specialists in every organ system is using the fact that our body is conductive. That's why a neurosurgeon can look at the EEG, your brainwave patterns, and do a sleep study. That's why a cardiac surgeon can look at an EKG of your heart and tell if it's healthy by its electrical patterns. That's why someone who has muscular dystrophy or something wrong with their muscles can have an electromyogram of their muscles and show what the electrical impulse is and tell us exactly what's going on. There are so many different ways where we do measure the electrical conductivity of the body, but for some reason it hasn't been pulled together into its own field of medicine, which I think it should be, conductive medicine. That should be pooling if every cell in your body is conductive and able to receive an impulse and able to respond to an electrical impulse. Why is that not its own field of medicine? That's the missing piece. It's not that doctors don't know that we are conductive and that we rely on conductivity for our gut to work, for us to take a step, for me to take a deep breath, for me to use my vocal cords, for me to think, for me to use my muscle. I mean, we do know that it's all conductive. But for some reason, we just haven't pulled that together to be its own treatment modality. That's what I don't understand. That's what's missing. We use it to diagnose, but we haven't wrapped our mind around using it as a treatment modality. And what's really interesting and why it's so important for you, to get this out right now is obviously in the middle of the pandemic, we've had a lot of our freedoms restricted, and for good reason. I'm not against that. I do feel like we should be social distancing. I do feel like we should be hygienic. I do feel like we should be wearing face coverings when we're out and about. But really, you can have almost all of your freedoms taken away from you except your need to connect to the earth, right? So this is one way that you can empower yourself to strengthen your health, even when you can't go out and see friends, even when you're not working at the office, you're working from home, or even when you don't feel, if you're high risk and you're not going into a grocery store and you're having your groceries delivered. But the one thing you can do to boost your immunity, to boost your resiliency, to decrease stress, wear and tear on your body for the rest of your life is just get grounded outside. You don't have to buy anything. You don't need a doctor's permission. You don't need a prescription at a drugstore. Literally, this is a tool that is 100% waiting for you, that is available even if you were in a prison. In the prison yard, there is a cement, usually courtyard, even when it's fenced in, and even there you can get grounded. So this is like one free healing modality that you cannot get taken away from you. And that's why it's really, really important to recognize this as a legitimate healing modality right now.
That's very good news for a lot of people. In Tokyo, I would take a grounding sheet with me to stay in hotels. And I came across the problem of being in a hotel that is very modern, and did not have any place to ground. In other words, to get a ground from the wall, because there are only two slits. Everything was plastic. Everything was non-conductive. And for most people, this was a very modern, wonderful hotel. But I actually wrote a letter to the hotel chain owner and suggested to her, if only you could change one thing in your hotel, it would be to make it possible for people to come into these rooms and find a grounded outlet, and be able to sleep grounded, because you haven't got trees, you haven't got concrete. If you were in that hotel, really isolated, you would be in trouble. And unfortunately for her, I believe, she chose not to respond to what could have been an incredible business opportunity. The first grounded hotel amongst all of these ungrounded hotels in a country full of hotels. That's how hard it is for people to make the simple shift from we are separate beings to we are actually conductive beings. That's a huge leap, unfortunately, for most people. But now that you've got this book out, you've actually suggested ways throughout the year that people can get grounded. You've admitted that you absolutely can't stand the cold and there is no way you're going outside in your bare feet in a winter. So you actually designed specific grounding ways for winter. Tell us a few of them.
Oh gosh. Well, the first thing to remember is that any of your skin is conductive. So it doesn't have to be, yeah, you're right. No way am I going barefoot when it's like less than 60 degrees out even. But luckily we have hands, which are much easier to bear because you can keep one in a pocket and use your hands to touch a tree or the ground or any conductive surface, the rock. And you can then alternate with your hands. So much easier than slipping shoes on and off, right? So if you can think of a way to touch something with your hands, there's even conductive gloves if you want to keep gloves on, and it allow grounding energy to go right through. Also, you are skin to skin grounding anyone you touch. So what if you're freezing cold and you're wrapped up, or your child is all bundled up? One of you can hold hands, and just only one person needs to touch the earth in any way, and they will. It's like instantaneous. Anything you're touching becomes grounded. So then that gave rise to me testing my own dog to see, okay, well then if I'm walking with my husband and holding hands and he's grounded, then I'm going to be grounded even though I'm warm. What about if I'm with my dog? So I tested in touching the dog where areas where they have less fur, snout, ears, belly, you can be grounded now through your pet. So that's a warm being you can touch while they're outside standing on the earth. You can stay warm and bundled up. And touch your pet and be grounded. There's so many different ways. You can make a grounding stake, which is just a metal piece of conductive metal that you push into the earth, and then you put a piece of metal wire. There you have to be careful because you'll want to put a safety mechanism in place because now you're freely conducting the earth's energy. But in case of a lightning strike, you want to put a resistor in the line, something that will short out in case there is a surge. But basically, you can run a wire in through any window and any door and touch that and be just as grounded as if you're outside. So, I mean, and there's endless ways.
Share with our viewers how on earth you're going to test that you are grounded when you touch your dog who is grounded, but you are ungrounded because you're wearing your Nikes and you're covered with clothes. How do you test that?
There's just grounding test meters. They're continuity test meters. You can plug directly into the earth. So it's a little prong that has a grounding plug, and you just plug it in like you were plugging to test any grounding outlet. You can get them at any hardware store just to test the wiring of your home. I'm not sure about in Japan, but in North America, you can just test that it's code, building code, that your building has to be grounded, because otherwise it's a hazard for a lightning strike. Every major appliance has to be grounded. So you can use that grounding system, which goes right to a ground rod and it's grounding your home. So they have testers. And so you can use those testers, but you don't have to be testing an outlet. You can literally plug it directly in the earth as if the earth is an outlet. And then it's just looking for a continuous loop. So if I plug my ground test meter into the earth and then I hold it with my hand, it's going to show I'm ungrounded if I'm not touching the earth, right? Because it's a dead end. It's going from the earth into me, but I'm not grounded, so it's a dead end. But if I now touch my pet, who is then also touching the ground, we've made a continuous loop and it'll show grounding. So it's basically a continuity tester.
This is really interesting what you said about if you hold the hand of somebody who is grounded and you are not, you are instantly grounded. We in fact tested that in Osaka, in a room full of ungrounded people. One person was grounded using a grounding mat attached to the ground coming out of the wall. And that person held hands with somebody else who was then tested as being grounded. And so the idea was, how many people will it take for the grounding effect to perhaps lessen or even disappear? And you would imagine that this energy would dissipate as it moves through people's bodies. That would be a common, I think, idea. However, we got up to 40 people and there was absolutely no difference. So, I'm wondering, is there a limit? Could there be 999 ungrounded people holding hands at the end with one grounded and they're all instantly connected? What do you think?
I think yes. So there's one caveat, which I'll tell you about in a second, but think of it as switching on the light. So you can pack an auditorium with thousands of people, and if you switch on the light, you're not like, well, maybe it won't reach me. I mean, it's just going to shine down on everybody. So the same with grounding. So there is no limit. It's instantaneous conductivity. So there's no limit, except in human beings, we have a dead layer of skin, keratinized layer of skin. And so people are not exfoliated if they build up calluses. And also, you need basically three things for conductivity. You need the surface to be conductive, so you can't have dead skin and calluses. You need to have minerals, because that's how conductivity works in the human body. So you can't be mineral depleted, which many people are. And you can't be dehydrated because you need moisture. So which is why like dry ice wouldn't conduct, but water does very well. Living wood conducts instantly. Anything grounded and rooted, it could be a weed, it could be a blade of grass, it could be a tallest leaf on the tallest tree. That tallest leaf on the tallest tree is just as grounded as the grass at the base. So because it's moisture. But if you had a dead, a deck that you made out of dead lumber, it doesn't matter how close to the ground you get, it's not going to conduct it because it's dried out and treated. So moisture, you need minerals, and you need a fresh conductive surface. And if those three are met, I don't think there's going to be a limit to how long that human chain could be, that you're still grounding the next person and the next person and the next person and the next person. Only if people are dehydrated, mineral depleted, or, they're really cold, their skin is dry, they've got a lot of calluses. Maybe you could convince me after a while it will decrease a little bit, but that would only be because of insulation between the people because of those issues, and not because the conductivity itself is petering out at all.
Well, this is important information right now, where even today a lot of people are isolated from other people, and we still haven't been able to measure the psychological and physiological effects of being isolated and not touching other people. However, all people are on the earth, and whether it's direct or indirect, you or me or anybody else connecting to earth is actually connecting to the field of life, including all plants, animals, and people. And who knows, it may even have a psychological benefit to know that being connected to the earth is actually keeping you in contact with the rest of humanity, even if it's only an image in your mind. But you mentioned in your book, Laura, that there is a quote-unquote spiritual aspect to grounding. Could you go into that a bit?
Sure. Well, I don't think it's even theoretical anymore. There is a whole field of medicine that is Psychoneuroimmunology, which means your mind frame and how you feel, and stressors like a pandemic that is causing stress. And now there's going to be a second wave even after the pandemic resolves, which eventually it will. Even if it lasts another year or two, it's going to eventually come to a close. And then we're going to be dealing with PTSD from this, especially in healthcare workers. That's something that I'm already in a medical conference treating PTSD for healthcare workers who are traumatized by what they're confronted with this. So there's tons of waves of immediate stress, immediate trauma, long-term trauma, psychological fears, and then translating into actual physiologic function in your body. And it's a whole field of medicine. So it's not even just theoretical. It is psychoneuroimmunology. Your mind frame affects the way that your brain functions, which is an electrochemical signal to your entire body, which affects your immune system. So it's kind of lose-lose when you're in a very stressful situation over prolonged periods of time. When you want to keep your immune system boosted, it actually worsens it, which I do believe in a roundabout way is one of the benefits of grounding. First, you're staying connected to something bigger than you. You have comfort from something that's trying to give you supportive, healing energy throughout your body, and you can physically feel it. So it's connecting you. It's fulfilling something that's been missing. Often it's the missing piece in people's health and healing. So I believe that provides, even in the best of time, immediate mood boost, immediate psychological gratification, and an immediate feeling of, it's kind of like, the romantic notion of if you miss your loved one, you look up at the moon and they can look up at the moon and you're both looking at the same moon at the same time. That kind of romantic notion is a very physical, real thing when you realize you're standing on the earth and everything is on the earth and we are all connected electrically through that. So there's that psychological component, but then there is also, which we kind of touched on earlier in this interview, an immediate central nervous system stabilization. Your brain goes into a very calm, healing alpha wave pattern, which then boosts your vagal tone, which, as we talked about, calms your heart rate, stabilizes your hormones, stabilizes your blood glucose, stabilizes your thyroid. I mean, there's a huge cascade of reactions to help kind of mitigate the effect of stress. And then long term, there's a boost to your immune system. And so I really look forward to the day when grounding is tied into the field of psychoneuroimmunology, because to me, grounding would be the ultimate treatment for all of the stressors that are in that field of medicine. But again, we're just a little too early. You know, hopefully my kids, when their parents or my grandkids grow up in a world where we finally put it all together and we have this field of conductive medicine. And we're fine because we're just starting. I mean, only in my lifetime since graduating medical school have people even talked about probiotics actually being psychobiotics, like probiotics improving mood, decreasing depression, decreasing anxiety, and boosting immunity. That we just found that out 10 years ago. So everything is just starting to fall puzzle pieces just now. And I really believe once we see the bigger picture, grounding is going to be absolutely critical for actually treating these things. Instead of just discovering the problems, when we get to the phase where we're treating them, it's going to be like, I kind of heard about grounding 20 years ago. Yeah, that makes sense now, you know?
It's amazing, isn't it, how long it takes for a paradigm shift to actually occur, even with all of the availability of information on the net. You've been putting out videos for a long time about this. They're freely available. Many people have seen them. Some people have probably started. Others may still have doubts, waiting for the medical hierarchies to dribble it down to them after a few decades has passed. But now I think your message is particularly important because of the global lockdown situation. And nobody in any of the discussions anywhere on earth, in any media, has ever once said, hey, if you earth inside your lockdown situation, it could help. You got the time. What have you got to lose? Well, we're saying it now.
Well, they show, I mean, there is even, and this is years ago, there was a medical study where they grounded infants in a NICU that were premature, that weren't supposed to even be a live breathing air yet. They're supposed to still be inside the womb. And they were struggling with their basic autonomic, function of breathing, heart rate, stabilizing their body temperature. And they showed that grounding stabilized it. And when they stopped grounding them, they went back to that unstable state. So if this premature infant, which is not like just trying to convince themselves, it's the same as animals. I always hear stories about pets finding where their owners grounding, always like, I always see my cat on my bed that's grounded, always, that kind of thing. Pets don't know. They're not using higher level thinking to force themselves to try a healing modality. They just gravitate. And same with these infants. And that was my experience with my own baby, was that she was in horrible discomfort with colic and crying unless she was grounded. Did she know that mommy was standing barefoot holding her? No. It's literally that innate, that biological. So with medical literature out there showing that even preemies who aren't aware they're grounded have stabilized parameters of health, stabilized vital signs, it's just kind of ridiculous that it's not.
There goes the placebo excuse out the window completely. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, so right now we're living in a society, I don't know about, where you're living, but where I live, we're told, even if you feel sick, do not go to the doctors, do not go to the emergency room because they're afraid if you had COVID that you're spreading it. So unless you need to call like an ambulance and you can't breathe, they want you to stay home and talk on the phone to a healthcare provider. So you are so isolated now that even when you are really sick, you can't easily seek help or support anymore. That's how isolated we are during this very, very stressful time. So for me, like for doctors to not be saying immediate things that you can do, but we're kind of muzzled because, controlling agencies definitely want, large scale human studies before you're allowed to really recommend something. So now it's like you can't even say common sense things. I can't even say common sense things like drink water, take some supplements, make sure you're eating well, monitor your respiration, connect to the earth, and let's formulate a treatment plan that includes things that are accessible to you right now, because I don't want you in the hospital. You know what I mean? I feel like we should be giving patients some alternatives, but unfortunately what you can do right now is suggest, and that's what you see all the commercials doing. They steer away from saying this will help you not get sick. What they instead have to say is vitamin C is immune boosting, because you can say that. So that's what you say. So you can say grounding is immune boosting. It helps treat stress. It helps resolve trauma. It helps boost your own immunity. So we kind of just stay with that and hope that patients read between the lines that this is something you can do right now. Like right now, you don't need permission. You need to try this because your entire body is conductive and it's waiting for support. And if you haven't supported it, some people haven't touched the earth in their whole life. Even people who hike, even people who play sports, they have protective gear on, and some people have literally functioned. They're electrically conductive. Their body is dependent on every electrical signal to breathe, to talk, to eat, to digest, to think, to move. And yet they have never even docked once and supported the electrical conductivity of their body. So it's sort of an emergency situation when then someone like that gets sick, right? Gets exposed to an illness or gets a disease. And still we're cautioned so far to not say that grounding is a way to address any negative illnesses or diseases. What we have to say is grounding makes you resilient. Grounding boosts your innate health. We have to just talk about the positive and hope that so far that people are smart enough to put two and two together, that this is a protective health benefit, and that my body's literally been waiting for its whole life, that I can do right now, and hope they try it.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope that they read your book, because the amount of creative ideas in here for every season is quite remarkable. A lot of fun practices that you've come up with, weekly routines, a 1-minute grounded prayer, pairing sauna with grounding for added benefits for each season. And so there's no excuse. Once you've read this, you can't be saying, oh, it's cold outside, I can't ground now, I have to take 3 months off. There's no excuse, right?
No, if you're going to live on the planet, you have to connect to it if you want optimum health.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, in conclusion, Laura, you know that this is going to probably the first foreign language will be Japanese. You are known to Japan through the short film that you were in, Down to Earth, which is already in Japanese with subtitles. But this will be the first book, I think, written by a medical doctor. And in Japan, of course, medical doctors are held in extremely high esteem, which is why the amount of over-the-counter drugs prescribed every day is astronomical, because there's almost a veneration. In Oriental culture, the doctor is always venerated just because of being a doctor. And so for you to be both a doctor and a woman, and on top of that have very long experience in this field of grounding, I believe will be pivotal in shifting people from that careful disbelief into the actual practice. And then they'll know. Once they do it, once you know, that's it. So what would be your message to those Japanese who are now thinking, well, it could be true and it might be true, but what would you say to them?
Exactly what you said so well, which is direct experience. You need to go for direct experience. You cannot afford to wait your entire lifetime and your children's lifetime for this to be a medically mandated standard of care, healing modality that's taught to everyone. Do not wait for that. Try for direct experience. There's no reason not to have it. And really, if you're hesitant, I don't know why you would be hesitant. There's no downside or harm, but just remember, any body part, any part of your skin touching anything living on the earth, or even rocks and cement, are conductive. And the key, what I really like to tell people to encourage them, is there's no time too short. Yes, you can accrue benefits over time, but if you're literally willing to do 2 minutes, please do 2 minutes. Please do 2 minutes and see. It takes 3 deep breaths. Go outside and take 3 deep breaths while you're touching the earth and feel the physiologic change in your body. Start with just that.
Wow. Okay, that's zero excuse level now. Well, if you'd like to learn more about actually shielding your body from the vastly increased amount of what we call EMFs, there's another interview specifically about electro hypersensitivity, which you can get here with Japanese subtitles. I recommend to everybody that they read the book, which of course you can get on Amazon or at your local bookstore, and follow Laura's work on her website, intuitionphysician.com, which you've got here, where there are many, many helpful, easy to practice ways for you to stay healthy without ever having to go and see a doctor. So thank you very much, Laura. I wish you all the very best with the new book, and we'll keep you updated if we have any questions about translation. Any final words for us?
Well, this is our 3rd interview, so now you just hit on the topic for our 4th, right? We're doing one every year. So next year we've got to talk about, or earlier, shielding. That's really important. We should focus not just on electrosensitivity, but how to shield, because like you said, we both know sitting here this time next year, we're going to have more environmental insults out there to our body, right? With ever increasing electrotoxicity from all the man-made products we're putting out there, which is a different current and a different frequency than our natural current and our natural electrical resonance with the earth. They're different. So you can maintain a connection with grounding and still shield from the fake man-made stuff. And there's different ways to do it so that it's beneficial to your body and not cutting off contact with the earth. So I think that should be our 4th interview. So that's just my last statement is, let's have a 4th interview about that.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it.
Welcome to Real Rover. I'm your roving host, John Craig. Real Rover へようこそ。クレイグ・ジョンでございます。